What if I told you that the great Viking feasts filled with steaming meat did not require a single metal pot or pan? You might imagine a pile of primitive, charred food, but you would be mistaken. The power of Scandinavian chefs lay not in metal, but in their mystical union with two ancient elements, stone and fire, which they transformed into perfect culinary tools. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how the Vikings created complex dishes and cooked whole oxen using techniques that seem like lost magic today. What I am about to reveal will change your perception of the Vikings forever. For a person of the Viking Age, a feast was not just a way to satisfy hunger, it was the center of their universe, a ritual act demonstrating power and wealth. Imagine a huge hall filled with warriors, where the tables are laden not with gold, but with the weight of food prepared without a single nail of modern civilization. It was an arena where the konung or jarl proved his generosity and ability to provide for the clan, and thus his right to lead it. Sitting at long tables, the warriors expected not just meat, but confirmation of their status, a reward for their loyalty. Every piece of food served was a symbol of the success of a recent campaign or a bountiful harvest.
To victory! May this unity last forever!
Refusal to participate in the feast or a meager meal could be taken as an insult, as a sign of weakness on the part of the leader. The entire social structure was based on this steaming, fragrant foundation. The very process of cooking was imbued with no less meaning than battles or voyages to distant seas. The cooks and slaves who prepared the feast were not mere servants, but guardians of ancient traditions passed down from generation to generation. They knew which stones retained heat and which brought death, shattering into thousands of fragments. They understood the language of fire, knowing how to tame it into smoldering coals for smoking or ignite it into a raging flame for a spit. In this world, cooking was inseparable from craftsmanship and even beliefs. Cooking for hundreds of warriors was as much of a feat as building a drakkar. It required planning, incredible physical strength, and a deep, intuitive understanding of natural materials. They had no thermometers or timers. Their only tools were experience, hearing, and smell. Food was a bridge between worlds, a way to honor the gods and ancestors. Large feasts were often timed to coincide with seasonal holidays, such as Yule, or important events such as weddings, funerals, or the return from a campaign. Sacrificial meat, cooked on ritual fires, was first offered to the gods and then shared among the members of the community. In this way, each participant in the feast became part of a single, unified ritual. This approach transformed an everyday process into a high art, full of drama and respect for nature. They did not conquer fire and stone, they entered into a union with them. It was this union that was the main secret that allowed them to create culinary masterpieces worthy of gods and kings. The Vikings proved that a real feast does not require metal, only skill. The feast was the apotheosis of their philosophy of life. Take what you have and make something great out of it. The lack of metal was not a limitation for them, it was a challenge that they brilliantly accepted. They turned necessity into a true art form. We would love to hear your opinion. What do you think about this sacred approach to cooking? Write about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Are you ready to learn the truth that not all stones are equally useful? For the Vikings, choosing a stone for the hearth was as important as choosing wood for the keel of a ship. A mistake could cost them not only a ruined dinner, but also serious injury. They intuitively understood geology, knowing that porous and damp stones collected at the water's edge would explode in the fire like small grenades. Therefore, for their stoves and hearths, they sought dense, dry rocks, such as granite or basalt, which had already stood the test of time. These stones were collected far from water, often from old, weathered rocks. They were brought to the settlement and stacked in special wood piles, allowing them to rest and dry completely. Only such proven stones could become part of the sacred process of cooking. For the Vikings, fire was not just a source of heat, but a living, almost intelligent entity. They distinguished between dozens of its states: a fierce, roaring flame for a spit, a calm, even heat for stone pans, and a barely alive, smoky ember for cold smoking. Controlling fire was a key skill that was passed down from father to son. They knew how to read the flame by its color and the sound it made.
The colors tell the story. Orange brings comfort, but blue holds the sacred heat. Master the blue, and you master the fire.
Preparing a large hearth for a feast was quite an event. First, a depression was dug, or a stone border was built. Then the largest, most tested stones were laid at the bottom. Only then was the fire lit, which was kept burning for hours, and sometimes for days, until the stones had accumulated enough heat. This process required patience and a huge amount of fuel. The Vikings mainly used hardwood such as oak or beech, which gave off an even, long-lasting heat and minimal soot. Birch logs were also valued, but more for their fragrant smoke, which was used for smoking. Wood was as important an ingredient as salt or herbs. When the stones were red hot, they could be used for various purposes. Some remained in the hearth, creating a base for the coals. Others, the cleanest and flattest, were carefully removed with wooden tongs. They could be used to fry fish or flatbread, and this method was much more effective than one might imagine. The stone became a heat accumulator, giving off heat slowly and evenly. This allowed the food to be baked rather than burned, preserving all the juices inside. The Vikings essentially invented the first induction cooker, where the energy carrier was not metal, but stone. This required skill. You had to know exactly when the stone was ready and how long it would maintain its temperature. But what if I told you that the most impressive method was hidden from view, under a thick layer of earth? In the next chapter, we will reveal the secret of the Vikings' underground oven, which could cook a whole ram without a single spark on the surface. Want to know the secret that turned the toughest meat into the most tender dish? The Vikings were masters of slow cooking, and their main invention was the earth oven, or groper.
The toughest cuts, mastered. We feast well tonight, my friends. Skål!
This method was the pinnacle of their culinary art, requiring not so much ingredients as time, patience, and a precise knowledge of the laws of physics. It all started with digging a deep pit, usually oval or round in shape. Its size depended on the scale of the feast. A small pit was enough for a regular dinner, but for a celebration in honor of the konung, they could dig a trench large enough to hold an entire bull. It was hard work, but the final result depended on the correct shape and depth of the pit. A thick layer of those very ripe, dry stones was laid at the bottom of the pit. Then a huge fire was lit in the pit. The fire burned for many hours, sometimes all night, until the stones at the bottom were red hot and the walls of the pit became as hard as ceramics. This was the energy accumulation phase, the most critical stage. When the fire burned out, most of the coals and ashes were carefully raked out. A thick layer of fresh, damp leaves was laid on the hot stones. Most often, burdock, maple, or fern leaves were used, which provided not only moisture, but also a subtle herbal aroma. This created a kind of steam cushion that protected the meat from direct contact with the stones. Then the main ingredient was placed in the pit. This could be a whole sheep, pig, or large pieces of venison. previously rubbed with salt and wild herbs such as cumin, juniper, and wild garlic. The meat was wrapped in several layers of the same leaves, and sometimes in clean cloth or skin to preserve all the juices. This method was ideal for preparing large quantities of food for a feast. It did not require constant supervision, freeing up hands for other tasks, and the result exceeded all expectations, turning even the oldest and toughest meat into a delicacy worthy of Odin's table. If you liked this ancient, slow cooking recipe, don't forget to like this video. What if I showed you a time machine that would transport you to a Viking kitchen? Imagine a flat, smooth stone lying in the heart of a roaring fire. It hisses and crackles from the heat, its surface becoming so hot that a drop of water evaporates before it even touches it. This is not just a boulder, it is the oldest frying pan, the perfect tool for quick frying. The Vikings were masters of this technique, especially when they needed to quickly cook their fresh catch. They selected large, flat stones from the riverbed, washed them thoroughly, and calcined them in a fire. This process not only heated the stone, but also disinfected its surface. Once the stone was hot, it was removed from the fire and placed on the coals. Fish, such as salmon or trout, were roasted on this improvised stove. The fish did not even need to be gutted or scaled. It was simply placed on the hot surface. The scales and skin were instantly seared, creating a protective layer that prevented the tender meat from sticking and kept all the juices and fat inside.
A meal truly worthy of Odin himself. Eat well, my friends.
After a few minutes, the fish was turned over with a wooden spatula. The result was a dish where the skin was crispy like chips, and the meat inside remained incredibly tender and juicy, infused with a light, smoky aroma. No modern non-stick frying pan can achieve this effect. The same method was used to make bread. Thin flatbreads were formed from a simple mixture of barley or rye flour, water, and salt. These flatbreads were thrown directly onto hot stones, where they puffed up and baked in a matter of minutes. Such bread was the perfect accompaniment to fried fish or meat stew. In addition to fish and bread, other things could be cooked on the stones. Thin slices of meat, wild mushrooms, or even eggs. The stone became a universal frying surface. It was the perfect way to have a quick snack while hiking or hunting, requiring no utensils. What other dishes do you think the Vikings could have cooked on these stone slabs? In the next chapter, we'll learn how the Vikings managed to cook soup in a wooden trough using the same stones.
Look at the steam! It's working!
We are used to thinking that a metal pot capable of withstanding direct heat is necessary for cooking soup or porridge. But the Vikings easily did without it, using one of the most ingenious methods in the history of cooking. They did not have fireproof cookware, but they had an abundance of hot stones. This simple fact formed the basis of an entire technology. Imagine a large wooden trough, or even a hollowed-out log filled with water, pieces of meat, and roots. It is impossible to build a fire under such a vessel. It would simply burn up. Therefore, the Vikings did something different. They did not carry the vessel to the fire, but rather brought the fire to the vessel. More precisely, they brought a particle of it, enclosed in a stone. A large fire always burned near the cooking site. In this fire, smooth, medium-sized stones were heated red-hot with the help of long wooden tongs. As soon as the stone was red-hot, it was removed from the fire, and after allowing the ash to drain off, was hissingly lowered into a wooden trough of water. The effect was instantaneous. The water around the stone exploded into myriads of bubbles, and the entire trough filled with steam. The temperature of the liquid rose sharply. The stone quickly gave off its heat and cooled down, after which it was removed and sent back to the fire to recharge, and the next red-hot projectile flew into the trough in its place. This process was continuous and required coordinated work. One or two people constantly recharged the stones in the fire, while another cook manipulated them in the trough. It was hard physical labor, but it allowed the water to be kept at a constant boil for several hours. This method could be used to cook anything. Not only meat and vegetable soups were cooked in boiling water, but also porridge, for example, made from barley. This method was also indispensable for brewing beer, one of the main drinks of the Vikings. Heating the wort with stones was the only method available in the field. This method also solved the problem of fragile clay pots. The Vikings did have clay pots, but they were expensive, heavy, and easily broken on the march. A wooden trough or even a pit lined with an impermeable skin was a much more practical solution. The result was a rich stew where meat and vegetables were not simply boiled, but rather simmered at a constantly changing temperature. In addition, the stones gave the broth a light, subtle mineral flavor and the aroma of smoke from the fire. It was a meal that absorbed all the elements: water, fire, and earth. What if I told you that the secret to the perfect steak was known to warriors 1,000 years ago? When it came to cooking really large pieces of meat, the Vikings had only one answer: an open fire and a spit. But what seemed simple was actually a high art that required superhuman patience and precise calculation. Imagine not a small grill, but a roaring fire as tall as a man. Above it, on massive wooden spits, a whole boar or deer slowly rotates. This process was the centerpiece of any feast, a demonstration of abundance and the chef's skill. Rotating such a giant required the physical strength of several people. The main secret was the distance from the fire. The meat could not be placed too close. It would char on the outside while remaining raw on the inside. It was kept at a considerable distance, allowing hot air and radiant heat to slowly bake the carcass. This process could take a whole day. Constant rotation was critical. It ensured even cooking on all sides and, most importantly, prevented the precious juices from escaping. Each turn of the meat seemed to seal itself. The dripping fat sizzled on the coals, rising back up as fragrant smoke and saturating the carcass. To prevent the meat from drying out during the many hours of roasting, it was constantly basted. Simple but effective marinades were used for this purpose. Everything was used: beer or ale, honey, salt water, and crushed wild herbs such as juniper, which gave the meat a characteristic northern flavor. What do you think the Vikings considered the most valuable marinade? In the next chapter, we will move from the heat of the fire to the cool shade and learn how the Vikings learned to preserve food for months using only smoke. For Vikings living in a harsh climate where winter lasted most of the year, the problem of preserving food was a matter of survival. A huge catch of fish or a successful hunt was meaningless if the prey could not be preserved. And here another ally came to the rescue: smoke, which the Vikings learned to use with surgical precision. They practiced two main types of smoking: hot and cold. Hot smoking was a quick method that simultaneously cooked the product and lightly preserved it. Fish or meat was hung close to hot coals in a closed smokehouse pit. The heat and thick smoke quickly cooked the product, giving it a golden color and a unique aroma. Such food was ready to eat immediately and was incredibly delicious, but it did not keep for long, only a few days. It was a way to quickly cook a large amount of food, for example, after a successful fishing trip, and eat it at the nearest feast. In this case, the smoke acted more as a seasoning. Cold smoking was a real art. This method did not cook the product, but mummified it, making it suitable for storage for many months. For this purpose, special smokehouses were built, often in the form of long trenches covered with turf or separate windowless huts. The idea was to keep the source of smoke away from the product itself. A fire was lit in a pit at one end of the trench. The smoke from smouldering, barely alive logs, most often alder or juniper, passed through a long underground channel. By the time it reached the chamber where fish or meat hung on poles, it had cooled completely. The product, previously soaked in a strong salt solution, hung in this cool, smoky chamber for several days, and sometimes weeks. The smoke slowly penetrated the tissue, displacing moisture and killing bacteria. The meat and fish became denser, dried out, and covered with a protective resinous crust. This process required constant monitoring. The fire could not be allowed to flare up, otherwise the product would be cooked. It had to smolder, producing thick, cold smoke. The fire had to be watched day and night, adding sawdust or wet branches to maintain the desired smoke density. It was monotonous, but vital work. A mistake in this matter was tantamount to losing the entire winter food supply. Therefore, the smoker was held in no less respect than a warrior or a blacksmith. He was the guardian of the future, the man who literally sealed life into food. Food processed in this way became incredibly resistant to spoilage. Cold smoking was, in essence, chemical preservation, where the smoke's smoking substances acted as antiseptics. They created a barrier on the surface of fish or meat that was impervious to bacteria. This technology allowed the Vikings to make their famous long sea voyages. In addition to meat and fish, bread was an important part of the Vikings' diet, and no metal was needed to make it. The simplest way was to bake flatbread on stones, as already mentioned. But for real bread, fluffy and filling, an oven was needed, and the Vikings built them out of clay and stone.
Careful, it is too hot to handle right now.
These were dome-shaped ovens, very similar to modern wood-fired pizza ovens. The frame was bent from willow rods, which were then coated in several layers with a mixture of clay, sand, and chopped straw. The clay served as a heat-resistant material, and the straw reinforced the structure, preventing it from cracking. After the clay dome had dried, a strong fire was lit inside. This not only burned out the internal willow frame, but also tempered the clay, turning it into durable ceramics. Such an oven, built in a single day, could serve its owner for several years. The baking process was simple and effective. A fire was lit inside the oven and burned for several hours until the walls accumulated enough heat. Then all the coals and ashes were carefully swept out. The oven was ready for use when its inner walls became clean and white from the heat.
The loaves are ready for the heat.
Soon we will eat well.
Shaped loaves of bread made from rye or barley flour were placed inside on a wooden shovel. The entrance to the oven was tightly closed with a wooden damper coated with clay for air tightness. The bread was baked exclusively by the heat accumulated in the thick clay walls. This heat was released slowly and evenly, creating ideal conditions for baking. The bread did not burn, but rather simmered, rising and covering itself with a thick, crispy crust. The taste of such bread, with a slight aroma of smoke, was incomparable to anything else. Other dishes could also be cooked in the cooling oven. After the bread, pots of porridge or soup were placed in the oven, where they finished cooking over several hours. In this way, a single heating of the oven was used with maximum efficiency.
This bread is excellent.
Indeed. I can already taste the oats in the porridge.
Viking cooking was not limited to heat treatment alone. Processes that we would today call biotechnologies played a huge role, primarily fermentation. This method not only preserved food, but also enriched its taste and created beverages. The main beverages of the Vikings were beer, ale, and mead. Nothing was needed to make them except wooden vats and stones. As we already know, the wort for beer was heated by placing hot stones in it to start the process of saccharification of the grain. After heating and cooling, the wort was left in large wooden vats. Fermentation was started by wild yeast that lived in the air or was preserved in the pores of the vat itself from previous batches. It was a natural process that turned simple barley water into a satisfying and intoxicating drink. Such ale was not just entertainment, but an important part of the diet. It was a high-calorie liquid bread that provided energy. In addition, in conditions of questionable drinking water quality, a low-alcohol beverage was often a safer choice, as the boiling and fermentation process killed most bacteria. Fermentation was also a key method of preserving fish, especially in the northern regions of Scandinavia. Well-known dishes with a pungent smell are relics of that era. Fish was salted and left to ferment in barrels or pits for several months. This process, which seems extreme today, was an ingenious solution for cold climates. Fermentation broke down proteins and fats, making the fish suitable for long-term storage without smoking or drying. It was preservation through a controlled process. The success of Viking cooking, based on stone and fire, would have been impossible without a whole arsenal of auxiliary tools. And although they were familiar with metal, more accessible and simple materials dominated everyday kitchen routines: wood, bone, and clay. Wood was a versatile material. Everything was carved from it, from huge troughs for cooking and fermentation to personal bowls and spoons. Every Viking carried a personal spoon, which was both a piece of cutlery and a status symbol. Master carvers created ladles, scoops, and stirrers that were perfectly suited for working with hot food. The wooden tongs and grippers we mentioned were the only way to safely handle hot stones. These were simple but absolutely indispensable tools. Bone and horn were also used. Horns were used to make sturdy and beautiful drinking cups that did not absorb odors as much as wood. Two-pronged forks were carved from bone, which, however, were used more for serving food than for eating. Clay dishes, although fragile, were still used. These were mainly pots for storing bulk foods or porridge, but putting them on an open fire was risky, as they could crack. Therefore, they were more often used in cooling ovens or for serving food at the table. Stone served not only as a frying pan, but also as a tool for processing. Heavy stone mortars and pestles were found in every home. They were used to grind grain into flour, crush salt, and chop herbs, creating fragrant mixtures. This whole system was self-contained and incredibly eco-friendly. All the tools were made from renewable or widely available materials. A broken wooden spoon or cracked clay pot didn't become trash. They just went back into the earth or fire where they came from. We see that the Viking world was built not only on the steel of swords, but also on the heat of stones. Their ability to create feasts using only the basic elements demonstrates not primitiveness, but the highest degree of skill and adaptation. They turned their harsh land into a source of abundance, proving that a true feast is born not from technology, but from the ingenuity of the spirit.
Tomorrow we embark on the greatest raid of our lives. The gods favor the bold, and we shall return laden with glory and gold.
What other aspects of Viking life and crafts would you like to explore with us? Suggest topics for future videos you would like to see in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new journeys into the past.